But how do we pray for Alzheimer's? How do we pray for senile dementia? And the first thing you have to understand is that they're not quite the same, but they look very similar. So dementia is really a chemical thing, and it has to do with neurotransmitters in the brain. And Alzheimer's is a physical degradation of the neural structure in the brain. And if you look at it under a microscope, it looks like moths have eaten the brain tissue. And my daughter's nodding her head, so I passed the medical exam. All right. Or at least at the layman's level. So they're not quite the same, but they present the same. So people always say, well, how do we pray for this? How do we see people get healed? And I see a lot of people get healed of it. And so here's how I think about that. And it's directly tied to what I'm about to teach you, but I'm going to give you an example before I get to the teaching. Because sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words. People who have either of these conditions commonly have one of three things going on. One of three things going on. Three. The first option is they did something somewhere in their life. It could be more than one something, but we'll just take the simplest case and say one something. And they would like to forget this. They don't really understand forgiveness. They may not even be Christian, so they wouldn't even have a framework for that. But like the woman I described in Australia who couldn't get clear about that, even though she had language for it, she didn't really have genuine belief. That's what's going on there. Whatever that thing is, they can't get beyond it because they're racked with guilt. They're racked with remorse. They're racked with shame. You could throw other words on the list, but that's option one. Option two, they had something done to them. Now, if it's the first option, what is that? That's a sin sickness, isn't it? If it's option two, what I'm about to tell you, this is inner healing. Something was done to them. So, it doesn't always have to be a sexual example. Maybe they got bullied at school. I remember praying for a guy in Australia in a part of the country where the weather is very hot, even hotter than Fresno. And that was supposed to be funny. And they build their houses on low stilts, and so there's like a crawl space under the homes, and all kinds of things end up in those crawl spaces. Snakes, wombats, sometimes a koala that falls out of a tree, whatever. But stuff ends up under the house. Well, one day this guy was walking home from school, and there was a group of kids in this class that bullied him. They didn't like him. And they started to chase him, and they were throwing rocks at him, and so he crawled under one of these houses, and he was a little smaller than these other boys, and they couldn't get under that crawl space. So on the one hand, he was kind of safe, but they took rocks and they were throwing him under the house like this, trying to hit him. And they were hitting him. So something was done to him. And that might be the kind of thing that could create an Alzheimer's or a senile dementia scenario. A lot of times people go to war and they do things or see things done or have things done to them, right? So I think an important part of the whole PSTD conversation has to do with things that might have been done to you in the context of perhaps being a POW. A lot of our Vietnam vets suffer with this. And a lot of them have very big mental health issues that include dementia and Alzheimer's. Okay, so your second option is something that was done to you. So case one, they have a sin sickness form of it. Case two, it's an inner healing thing. Case three is slightly different, but it's closer to case two, and that is they didn't do anything and nothing was done to them, but they observed something. They were in the context of it. So I've seen this, for example, in families with multiple kids, and maybe dad would beat one of the kids. But for whatever reason, the other kids didn't get beaten. But they saw it, they heard it, it was traumatizing, it was terrifying. They're standing by, they're nearby. Well, that's going on. So they need to be healed of that memory. So in a sense, it was done to them, but it wasn't physically done to them. There's still an impact from it. Does that make sense? Okay, just trying to be really crystal clear about each and every one of these. So what happens is that's all your root, and now later in life, the career curve maybe has flattened out. They're probably not getting another big promotion because they've reached that age where big corporations and don't really promote you. Or the kids are grown. So the burden of caring for them, being sure they're well attended to, that they've done their homework, they've gotten settled in life, they've finished their education, they've gotten married, whatever it might be. That's all in the rearview mirror. And so you've got this situation, and the way I like to characterize this is a metaphor, it's a word picture. Think of somebody who likes to ride horses, and maybe they like to ride bareback. They don't have a saddle and reins on the horse. And let's say it's someplace that gets a lot of fog. The Central Valley can get a lot of fog at certain times of the year, but so do the Highlands of Scotland and all that. So any place that has a lot of fog, could be Big Sur. They've gone horseback riding, and instead of hanging on to the horse's neck or maybe the mane or however it is you hang on when you're riding bareback, they just let go of the horse, and they let the horse run where it will. And they run into a fog bank. You can still, if you're standing by observing this, you can still hear it go as the horse is galloping, but the hoofbeats are getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And of course, they're in a fog bank. They can't see. They can't find their way out. They don't know where they are. They're losing their sense of orientation and perspective. How do you heal this? Well, first thing you've got to do is figure out, did they do something? Was something done to them, or were they an observer to something? And then apply the appropriate prayer technique. So we talked last night about how to deal with the sin sickness one, and in this thing this morning, we're going to talk about what to do if something was done to them or they observed it. So how are you going to get that information? Well, if they're not too far gone, you can ask them. If they are pretty far gone, ask their near family and friends, because nearly everybody talks a little bit about things that bother them. Often they don't talk much, but they can at least tell you what that thing may have been, and you'll at least have some definition around the problem. Then you'll use the appropriate prayer technique, and once you've prayed inner healing over them, or forgiveness of the sin sickness if that's the problem, now we summon them back out of the fog. So think of yourself standing on the beach in Big Sur, and you say, Janie, come back to us. Well, she's in the fog, but she can orient by your voice, right? Does that make sense? Summon them, literally, like Lazarus, come out. That same kind of thing. Summon them out of the fog and summon them back to you. And I've literally seen it happen. I was in New Jersey a couple months ago, and I prayed for a woman they brought in who had very advanced Alzheimer's, and it was Alzheimer's. And we had to, I actually had to talk to her daughter and son who had brought her about what was her issue. And they didn't know a lot, but they knew a little bit. So we prayed what we knew. Now, with this one, you have to be led by the Spirit, and you'll just pray according to your best understanding, whatever that is. You'll feel weak and lame because you don't have full knowledge, but you still do it. And then I called her out of the fog, and she literally kind of did like this, and she looked and she said, "Oh, it's so nice to see you." Her daughter was right here on my left. She said, "Where are we? I didn't know that we were coming to church." And she starts talking with her, and she goes, "Mom," whatever the brother's name was, "he's right behind you." She turns around, she goes, "Oh, how nice to have both of you with me." And she says, "Well, now that we're all together, after church is over, can we go to lunch?" They start crying. They're like, what just happened here? So these concepts are super powerful, but you do have to move slow enough to make sure they work. A lot of times people want to pray these prayers in 60 seconds or 90 seconds. That doesn't work very well, does it, Robert? You got to take the time and let these things unpack. So for her, that woman in that wheelchair that morning in New Jersey a few months ago, I think I prayed with her about 20 minutes, which is relatively quick, but I kind of knew what I was after, so that accelerated things. But don't think you're going to do this in a 60-second prayer at the altar. If it should happen, you got lucky and you had a miracle. There you go. There's your answer on that one. So anyway, the last thing that I normally do with people who have, whether it's dementia or Alzheimer's, is I'll pray for physical healing. So if it's dementia, we're going to pray for a rebalancing of the body chemistry, that the neurotransmitters would all be correct. And if it's Alzheimer's, we're literally praying for a miracle, the restoration of brain tissue that's been eaten up or decayed or whatever the right word is. Anna could explain that. But that's how we do it.